Margaret sat at the head of the oak dining table, the one she'd refinished herself after Henry's funeral 15 years ago. The wood still bore faint scratches from where her grandchildren, back when she had access to them, had scribbled with crayons during family visits. But tonight, there were no grandchildren. Just her son, Alex, and his wife, Sophia, who was meticulously slicing into a roast beef that Margaret had spent the afternoon preparing. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic, but the warmth of the meal couldn't penetrate the chill in the room. It was December 12th, 13 days before Christmas. The string lights Margaret had hung around the windows twinkled softly, casting a festive glow that felt mocking. Sophia, with her sleek bob haircut and designer earrings that dangled like accusations, looked up from her plate and said it casually, as if commenting on the weather. "You can stay here, Alex. Just you, not your mother, not the extended family. We want a peaceful holiday, like a real family getaway." Margaret's fork paused midair. She stared at Sophia, waiting for the punchline, but there was none. Alex, her only child, the boy she'd raised single-handedly after Henry succumbed to a heart attack at 55, kept his eyes fixed on his mashed potatoes. He poked at them with his fork, the tines scraping against the china plate that had been part of her wedding set. The house in the quiet suburb of Boston was hers, paid off with the life insurance from Henry and her salary as a high school English teacher for 35 years. She'd retired 4 years ago, at 66, thinking she'd finally have time for gardening, book clubs, and spoiling Alex's future kids. But life had other plans. "Sophia," Margaret said, her voice steady but laced with the tremor of betrayal, "this is my home. Christmas has always been here with family." Sophia set down her knife and fork, folding her hands neatly. Her nails were painted a deep crimson, perfect as always. "Margaret, at your age, all the noise and chaos isn't healthy. We're thinking of you. Alex and I need some space to reconnect. My parents have a cabin in the Berkshires. It'll be intimate." At 70, Margaret was far from frail. She volunteered at the local library twice a week, hiked the nearby trails on weekends, and had just finished an online course in creative writing. But to Sophia, she was an relic, something to be stored away like old holiday decorations. Alex cleared his throat. "Mom, it's just, Sophia's folks really want us there, and we could use a break. You've been so generous letting us stay here." Generous? The word stung like a slap. Margaret pushed back her chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor she'd polished last month. "Enjoy your dinner," she said, her voice cracking only slightly. She retreated to her bedroom upstairs, the one with the bay window overlooking the snow-dusted backyard. The neighborhood lights blinked like distant promises, families gathered in warmth while she felt the cold seep into her bones. She didn't cry, not this time. Instead, a spark ignited, a quiet fury that had been smoldering for 4 years. She opened her laptop, the screen's glow illuminating her determined face. Fingers flying over the keys, she searched for flights, hotels, anything to escape. By midnight, she'd booked a ticket to Aspen, Colorado for $1,200, a ski resort town she'd always dreamed of visiting but never had the chance. She didn't tell anyone. For once, this was for her. But as she saved the confirmation, she had no idea this impulsive act would unravel everything. 9 days later, when that photo went viral, the one of her laughing with a handsome stranger in a cozy cafe, his hand gently on hers, her phone would explode with calls. Alex would demand answers, Sophia would seethe, and the truth about their temporary stay would come crashing down like an avalanche. If this tale of quiet rebellion tugs at your soul, read on. Stories like Margaret's remind us that sometimes freedom starts with a boarding pass. 4 years earlier, in March 2021, Alex had shown up at her door with a U-Haul truck and a sheepish grin. "Mom, the pandemic wrecked us. My marketing firm laid me off and Sophia's boutique is barely hanging on. We lost the condo to foreclosure. Can we crash here? Just until we get back on our feet, 6 months tops." Margaret had hugged him tightly, her heart aching for her 38-year-old son. "Of course, darling, this house is big enough for all of us." Sophia had trailed behind, her arms laden with designer bags, her high heels clicking on the porch. "Thank you, Margaret. We'll try not to be a burden." The first few months were manageable. Alex set up a home office in the spare room, pounding the pavement for freelance gigs. Sophia helped with chores sporadically, though she complained about the outdated kitchen appliances. Margaret cooked hearty meals, lasagna, pot roast, apple pie, reminding herself it was temporary. They were family. But by the 6th month, the shift began. Sophia, with her impeccable style and social media influencer aspirations, started suggesting changes. One evening, she cornered Margaret in the living room, holding a home decor catalog. "Margaret, this floral sofa, it's charming, but it clashes with the modern flow. What if we reupholster it? Or better, replace it?" The sofa was where Henry had proposed, its faded roses a map of their life together. "It's sentimental, Sophia. It stays." Sophia pouted, turning to Alex, who was scrolling on his phone. "Honey, back me up, it's just fabric." Alex shrugged. "Mom, it's a bit worn. Maybe a refresh wouldn't hurt." 2 weeks later, Margaret returned from her book club to find the sofa gone, replaced by a sleek gray sectional from a big box store. "I donated the old one," Sophia explained breezily, snapping selfies on the new piece. "Got $200 credit toward this beauty. You're welcome, it brightens the room." $200 for a piece worth thousands in memories. Margaret's throat tightened, but she said nothing. She didn't want to drive a wedge. The invasions escalated. The hand-knitted Afghans Margaret's sister had made before passing from breast cancer, folded away in the attic. "Too folksy," Sophia decreed, draping minimalist throws instead. The family photos on the mantel, Henry's smiling face, Alex's graduation, were rearranged to make space for Sophia's abstract art prints. "We need balance," she said. Worse were the daily erasures. Margaret's fine china, saved for holidays, became everyday wear. "If it's not used, why keep it?" Sophia quipped, chipping a saucer while loading the dishwasher. And the bills, oh, the relentless bills. Electricity spiked with Sophia's endless Zoom calls and hair tools. Groceries ballooned as Sophia insisted on organic everything. Gas for Alex's car, subscriptions to streaming services, even Sophia's yoga studio membership, all charged to Margaret's accounts. On average, $2. $800 a month drained from her pension and savings. When she gently broached contributing, Sophia's eyes flashed. "Margaret, we're in a recession. You have security, we're starting over. Are you really going to nickel and dime family?" Alex, once her confidant, grew distant. The boy who'd call her weekly now avoided eye contact. One night, finding him alone on the porch, Margaret ventured, "Alex, we used to talk. What's wrong?" He sighed. "Mom, you're always hovering, criticizing with those looks. Sophia feels judged. It's stressful enough without the tension." Judged? In her own home? Margaret retreated, becoming a shadow. She ate alone in the kitchen while they dined in the living room, laughing at shows on the flat screen Sophia had upgraded with Margaret's credit card. She gardened alone, read alone, slept with the echo of loneliness. The Christmas exclusion was the breaking point. Packing quietly, Margaret left a note. "Gone for the holidays. House is yours." She boarded the flight to Aspen, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Aspen was magic, snow-capped peaks, bustling streets lined with boutiques and cafes. She checked into a cozy inn, splurging on a room with a fireplace. For the first time in years, she breathed freely. She skied beginner slopes, joined a seniors hiking group, and even tried hot cocoa tastings. On December 21st, at a quaint cafe, she met him. Thomas, a 72-year-old widower, retired architect with kind eyes and a warm laugh. They bonded over shared losses, his wife to Alzheimer's 5 years prior. "Life's too short for regrets," he said, clinking mugs. They spent days exploring, gondola rides, art galleries, stargazing. On Christmas Eve, a photographer snapped their photo, Margaret beaming, Thomas's arm around her, as part of a Holiday Joy in Aspen feature. It went viral on social media. "Heartwarming, seniors find love in the snow." Back home, Alex's call came furious. "Mom, who's this guy? Sophia's livid. The house is in chaos without you." The truth spilled. Thomas wasn't just company. He'd encouraged Margaret to check her finances. Turns out, Alex and Sophia had been siphoning funds, using her accounts for business investments that were really luxury splurges. The viral photo exposed their freeloading to friends and family. Confrontations followed. Alex apologized tearfully, admitting Sophia's control had blinded him. Sophia packed and left, filing for divorce. Alex moved out, vowing to rebuild. Margaret sold the house, bought a condo in Aspen near Thomas. They traveled, wrote stories together, hers published in a senior's anthology. At 70, she wasn't invisible, she was alive. The war had ended, but Margaret had won the peace. Sometimes, liberation begins with a plane ticket and a viral smile. The faded echo. My name is Margaret Hayes, and for most of my life, I was the kind of woman who built things. Homes, families, memories, with steady hands and a quiet resolve. I raised 2 children on my own after my husband, Tom, passed from a sudden heart attack when I was just 42. I worked as a school librarian for 30 years, surrounded by stories that taught me the power of words, even if I rarely used my own to fight back. But by the time I turned 68, in the fall of 2022, I had become something else. A ghost in my own story, whispering apologies for existing. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. My daughter, Leela, and her husband, Marcus, had hit hard times. Leela's graphic design business tanked during the pandemic, and Marcus lost his job as a sales rep when his company downsized. They were drowning in rent for their tiny apartment in Seattle, with a baby on the way, my first grandchild. "Mom," Leela had said over the phone, her voice cracking like it did when she was a little girl afraid of the dark. "We don't know what to do. Can we stay with you, just until we get back on our feet?" Of course, I said yes. My house in Portland was too big for one person anyway, a cozy craftsman bungalow I'd bought with Tom after our wedding. It had a garden out back where I grew tomatoes and herbs, a sunroom filled with books, and an attic full of treasures from our life together. I cleared out the guest room, bought fresh linens, and stocked the fridge with Leela's favorites, organic yogurt, fresh berries, and that fancy almond milk she loved. They moved in that October, promising it was temporary. 6 months, tops, Marcus assured me, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old pals. But 6 months turned into a year, then 2. And somewhere along the way, the house stopped feeling like mine. At first, it was small things. Leela rearranged the kitchen cabinets without asking, moving my mismatched mugs to the back to make room for her sleek, minimalist glassware. "It's more efficient this way, Mom," she'd say with a bright smile, her belly swelling with the promise of new life. Marcus took over the garage for his home gym, stacking my gardening tools in a corner under a tarp. I didn't complain. I was happy to help. When baby Theo arrived in March 2023, the house filled with cries and coos, and I reveled in it, rocking him to sleep, singing the lullabies I'd sung to Leela and her brother years ago. But joy has a way of masking cracks. By summer, Leela was back to freelancing from home, her laptop perpetually open on the dining table I'd refinished myself after Tom's death. Marcus found odd jobs, driving for Uber, fixing bikes, but nothing steady. They started borrowing money. "Just for diapers, Mom," Leela would say. "Groceries are so expensive now." I'd transfer $200 here, $300 there from my pension and savings. I didn't mind. Family helps family. Then came the yard sale. It was a crisp September morning in 2023, the kind where the leaves crunch underfoot and the air smells like cider. I woke to the sound of clattering downstairs. Leela and Marcus had set up tables in the driveway, piling on items from the attic. Tom's old fishing rods, my collection of vintage teacups from estate sales, even the quilt my grandmother hand-stitched for my wedding. "We're decluttering," Marcus explained, not meeting my eyes. "We need space for Theo's toys, and hey, extra cash never hurts." I stood there in my robe, heart pounding. "Those are memories," I whispered, picking up a teacup with trembling fingers. It had a delicate rose pattern bought on a rainy afternoon in London during our honeymoon. Leela waved it off. "Mom, they're just things. We can use the money for Theo's daycare." By noon, strangers were haggling over my past. The quilt went for $20, the teacups for $5 each. I retreated to the kitchen, brewing tea in a plain mug, swallowing the lump in my throat. That night, I didn't say a word. I just nodded when Leela handed me $150. "Your share, Mom," and went to bed early, the house feeling a little emptier. As fall deepened, the discomfort grew. Leela hosted mommy meetups in the living room, a gaggle of young women with strollers and lattes, chatting about sleep training and organic purees. "Would you mind watching Theo upstairs, Mom?" she'd ask sweetly. "We don't want to disturb you with all the baby talk." Upstairs, in my own home, I'd climb the stairs to the spare room, now Theo's nursery, holding him close, listening to their laughter echo below. "What a charming place," one woman said. "Leela, you've got such great taste in decor." Leela's voice. "Thanks, we've been updating it bit by bit." Updating, that meant replacing my floral curtains with stark white blinds, painting over the warm beige walls with cool gray. "It's more modern, Mom," Marcus said. "Increases the home value." Whose home? I wanted to ask, but I bit my tongue, expert now at silence. The breaking point crept in like frost. One evening in November, I came home from my weekly book club, the one sliver of life still mine, to find the sunroom transformed. My bookshelves were gone, replaced by a treadmill and yoga mats. "We needed a workout space," Leela explained, bouncing Theo on her hip. "Your books are in boxes in the basement. Don't worry, we didn't throw anything out." But they had. I found pages torn, spines cracked from careless packing. Among them was Tom's favorite novel, The Great Gatsby, inscribed with his handwriting. "To Maggie, my green light across the bay." A page was ripped. I clutched it, tears blurring the words, but when Leela asked if I was okay, I murmured, "Fine, dear, just tired." Thanksgiving that year was a farce. They invited Marcus's family over, his boisterous parents and siblings, without telling me until the day before. I spent hours cooking, turkey, stuffing, my famous cranberry relish. But at the table, Leela announced, "Mom, why don't you eat in the kitchen? It's crowded in here and Theo might fuss." I stared at my plate, the steam rising like my unspoken fury. I ate alone, forks scraping porcelain, while laughter boomed from the dining room. Later, clearing plates, I found my grandmother's china chipped, 3 saucers cracked. "Oops," Marcus shrugged. "Slippery hands, they're old anyway, right? Time for something durable." Old, like me, chipped away piece by piece. December brought the holidays, a season I once cherished. I'd deck the halls with twinkling lights, bake gingerbread, play carols on the old record player. But Leela declared it minimalist Christmas. No real tree, too messy for Theo. Instead, a slim faux pine with white ornaments. No stockings by the fireplace. Clutter. My nativity set, carved by Tom during his woodworking phase, was boxed away. "It's dated, Mom," she said. "We're going for a clean vibe." On December 10th, over a dinner of takeout pizza, they'd stopped eating my home-cooked meals. I mustered courage. "What about Christmas Day? Shall I make ham?" Leela exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Actually, Mom, we're going to my in-laws in Tacoma. You can relax here. It'll be quiet." Quiet, alone, in my house on Christmas. The words hung like icicles. Marcus added, "Yeah, no offense, but it's a long drive with the baby." That night, something shattered, not porcelain, but the dam I'd built around my voice. I paced my bedroom, the smallest room now since they'd claimed the master for more space. Rage boiled, cold and sharp. I opened my laptop, the glow harsh in the dark. Flights to Boston, where my brother Jack lived. He'd been begging me to visit. December 24th to 29th. $750 round trip. My finger hovered. What if they needed me? What if this sparked a fight? No. Enough. Click, ticket bought. But I didn't stop there. I pulled up my bank app, scrolling through statements. Every loan, every bill. Utilities they'd run up with endless showers and AC blasts, groceries for their organic obsessions, Theo's doctor visits, Leela's new laptop for work. I tallied it in a notebook, pen scratching furiously. $72,500 over 2 years. More than my yearly pension. Money for my retirement dreams, a cruise, a garden shed piece. Gone. Siphoned into their life, while mine faded. I splashed water on my face, staring at the mirror. Wrinkles deeper, eyes duller. Who was this stranger? "No more," I whispered. I created a folder. Reclaim. Screenshots of transfers, photos of the sunroom before the takeover, texts from Leela promising repayment. Then I called Jack. "Maggie, it's midnight here." His voice warm and familiar. "I need to come visit," I said, voice steady for the first time in years. "And I need advice on boundaries." Christmas Eve, I packed quietly. They were out shopping. I left a note. "Gone to visit Jack. Back the 29th. Merry Christmas." As the plane lifted off, Portland shrinking below, I felt it, a spark reigniting. Not just escape, but rebirth. When I returned, things changed. Not overnight, but steadily. I presented the tally over coffee. "This is what you owe, and you have 3 months to find your own place." Leela cried, Marcus blustered, but I held firm. Theo's giggles softened the edges, but not my resolve. They moved out in March 2024. The house echoed at first, but I filled it with books back on shelves, the quilt repurchased from a thrift shop, new teacups. I joined a writing group, penning stories of women who found their voices. Leela and I mended slowly. She paid back in installments, apologies woven in. Marcus grumbled, but that was his burden. Now at 70, I sit in my sunroom, tea steaming, garden blooming outside. I'm no whisper anymore. I'm the author of my own tale, words bold and unbroken. This story stands alone as a complete narrative, with a beginning setup of the situation, middle escalating conflicts and realizations, and end resolution and empowerment. It's longer to allow for character development and emotional depth. If you'd like adjustments or expansions, let me know. Whispers of Sage and Snow. In the dim glow of her bedside lamp, Clara poured out her soul to her oldest friend, Leela. The words tumbled from her lips like autumn leaves caught in a gale, 3 years of buried grief, swallowed resentments, and quiet desperations. The antique oak dresser her late husband, Thomas, had carved by hand, the shattered porcelain teacups from their honeymoon in Provence, the porcelain figurine of a dancing ballerina, tucked away in the attic like a shameful secret, the hollow Christmases that once brimmed with laughter, her son, Ethan, who had become a shadow of the boy she raised, his wife, Miranda, whose sharp tongue sliced through the air like winter wind, and the home that no longer felt like hers, but a borrowed stage for their lives. Leela didn't interrupt. She simply listened, her breath steady on the other end of the line, a lifeline across the miles. When Clara's voice finally cracked into silence, spent and raw, Leela's response came soft as a snowfall. "Come to Asheville, spend Christmas with me. I've already booked the train ticket." Clara blinked into the darkness, her heart stuttering. You did." A chuckle rippled through the phone, warm and familiar, pulling Clara back to sun-drenched college summers and midnight confessions. "Oh, Clara, I knew that fire was still flickering in you. You just needed a spark to fan it alive." "I'm terrified, Leela," Clara admitted, her voice a whisper. "What if leaving means I lose Ethan forever?" Another pause, heavy with the weight of shared years, then Leela's voice, seasoned with the quiet authority of someone who had danced through her own storms. "Clara, do you truly have him now?" The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through Clara's chest. No, she didn't. For months, years, perhaps, Ethan had been a polite stranger, his eyes sliding past her like she was a faded photograph on the wall. What she clung to was a ghost wearing his features, but devoid of the boy who once built forts in the living room and begged for one more story. "Come," Leela urged again, her tone firm yet tender, "and pack your finest things. We're going to dust off the woman you hid away." They lingered on the line past midnight, the conversation ebbing into comfortable silences. When Clara finally set the phone down, sleep evaded her. A reel of memories unspooled in her mind. The relentless humiliations, the words she'd choked back like bitter medicine, the fragments of herself surrendered in vain pursuit of scraps, love, acknowledgement, a seat at her own table. None had come, only echoes of emptiness. At dawn, as the first gray light seeped through the curtains, Clara rose. The kitchen, once her sanctuary of flour-dusted counters and simmering pots, now felt like a battlefield of unspoken defeats. She brewed coffee, strong and black, the steam curling like unanswered prayers. From a drawer, she retrieved a crisp sheet of stationery and a fountain pen, its nib still etched with Thomas's initials. In neat, looping script, she wrote, "I'll be away for Christmas. Enjoy the holiday." Succinct, unyielding, no apologies, no justifications. She owed them nothing more. The note fluttered onto the scarred wooden table beside the percolator, a quiet declaration of war on her own invisibility. Upstairs, she unearthed the leather valise Thomas had gifted her on their 20th anniversary. "For adventures across the seas, my wanderer," he'd murmured, his calloused hands tracing its seams. It had gathered dust in the attic, a relic of dreams deferred. Now she filled it with intention. Not the threadbare cardigans and shapeless slacks she donned to fade into the wallpaper, but the dresses exiled to the closet's depths. The emerald silk that hugged her curves like a lover's promise, the sapphire chiffon that whispered of moonlit dances, the crimson wrap dress Thomas had called her autumn flame. They fit, perhaps a touch tighter at the hips, a testament to time's gentle sculpting, but they fit. She layered in her polished leather boots, the vial of jasmine perfume reserved for rare joys, and the silver locket with Thomas's photo nestled against her skin. This was no mere packing, it was resurrection. The Clara who laughed freely, who dreamed in watercolor strokes, who refused to dim her light for anyone. By 10 a.m. on December 17th, 8 days shy of Christmas, the valise snapped shut. Ethan and Miranda slumbered on, their weekend ritual of languid mornings a luxury Clara had long relinquished. She descended the stairs on silent feet, stowing the bag in the mudroom behind coats that smelled of neglect. For the days that followed, she moved through the house like a specter in reverse, cooking meals with mechanical precision, scrubbing counters until they gleamed, murmuring hellos that barely grazed the surface. But beneath the routine, a seismic shift hummed. Miranda's chatter about her family's lavish Yuletide feast no longer twisted like a knife. Ethan's distracted nods didn't hollow her out. She had her own horizon now, one they weren't part of. On the evening of December 23rd, as snow dusted the windows like powdered sugar, Ethan and Miranda finalized their preparations for the drive to her parents' estate in the Hamptons. "Anything you need before we head out, Clara?" Miranda inquired, her voice honeyed with feigned concern, eyes scanning the room for flaws. "No, dear, the pantry's stocked enough for one at least." Miranda's smile was a porcelain mask. "We'll be back the 26th. Don't wait up." Ethan hefted the suitcases without a glance her way, his broad shoulders a barrier between them. From the frost-laced window of her bedroom, Clara watched the taillights of their SUV pierce the twilight, shrinking into oblivion. A laugh bubbled up, unbidden and pure, the first genuine mirth in 3 years. It tasted like freedom, sharp and sweet. She programmed her alarm for 5:30 a.m. the next morning. Dawn on Christmas Eve would herald not loss, but rebirth. Though she couldn't foresee it then, the stranger awaiting her in Asheville wouldn't merely mend her holiday. He'd rewrite the script of her days. 5:30 a.m., December 24th. The chime pierced the velvet dark, and Clara silenced it with a flick, her pulse a thunderous rhythm. The house loomed empty, its silence no longer a shroud, but a canvas wiped clean. She showered under a cascade of scalding water, steam rising like incense to banish the residue of concessions, of hunching her shoulders, of silencing her steps, of evaporating into the ether. In the fogged mirror, she selected the garnet velvet gown, its fabric cool against her skin. It clung softly, accentuating the silver threads in her chestnut hair, igniting a warmth in her cheeks she hadn't seen since Thomas's last embrace. Makeup followed, a sweep of taupe shadow to deepen her hazel eyes, a rose tint on lips that had forgotten their curve. The reflection stared back, not with defeat, but defiance, a woman emerging from chrysalis. 6:15 a.m., the valise waited by the door like a faithful steed. The home gazed at her indifferently. The sleek minimalist furniture Miranda had insisted upon, the blank walls stripped of Thomas's landscapes, the corners where Clara's laughter had faded to echoes. She locked the door without regret, the click of final punctuation. An Uber whisked her through pre-dawn streets to Penn Station, where the world stirred with festive frenzy, toddlers in elf ears tugging at mittened hands, lovers entwined over steaming lattes, trolleys groaning under wrapped parcels. Clara navigated the throng alone, her stride unhurried, her heart buoyant. Solitude wasn't isolation, it was sovereignty. The Amtrak Crescent departed on schedule, her seat by the window framing the receding skyline of Manhattan. Skyscrapers yielded to frost-kissed suburbs, then the undulating spine of the Appalachians. Clara traced the route in her mind, the city of her youth, where she'd met Thomas amid the clamor of art school critiques, where vows were exchanged under cherry blossoms, where Ethan entered the world with a wail that shook her to joy, where Thomas's heart faltered one ordinary Tuesday, leaving her adrift. She pressed her forehead to the cool glass, exhaling the weight of it all. The train's lullaby rocked her into a dreamless doze. Asheville welcomed her at midday with a crisp embrace, crimson maples ablaze against cerulean skis, the air laced with pine and wood smoke. Quaint streets wound past galleries and breweries, strings of chilly lights twinkling prematurely in the winter pallor. Fiddles and banjos spilled from open doorways, mingling with the scent of gingerbread from corner bakeries. It was a tapestry of whimsy, far from the steel-end concrete cage she'd fled. Leela awaited on the porch of her cedar-shingled bungalow, nestled in the Montford Historic District. Bougainvillea, defiant in the chill, cascaded from wrought iron railings, framing her in riotous pinks. At 65, Leela was a vision of unapologetic vibrancy, silver-streaked bob-framing laugh lines, a caftan swirling like a painter's palette. "Clara!" she cried, bounding down the steps. Their embrace was a dam-breaking, Clara's sobs wrenched from depths long sealed, tears salting the losses. The dresser bartered for Miranda's modern upgrade. The teacups ground underfoot in a careless rage, the ballerina figurine banished like a curse, the holidays pilfered by indifference. Leela held her through the torrent, murmuring nothing but her name, her arms a harbor unyielding. When the storm subsided, Leela led her inside to a haven of eclectic warmth. Exposed beams overhead, bookshelves groaning with dog-eared tomes, a hearth crackling with applewood. "Rest, my love. I've prepared the guest room, the one with the turret view." The space was a poem in pastels, sage walls, a four-poster draped in chenille, French doors opening to a courtyard where camellias bloomed stubborn and red. But first, sustenance. Leela's kitchen yielded mugs of mulled cider, spiced with cloves and orange zest, alongside scones studded with cranberries. They talked in fragments, old flames, forgotten travels, until Clara's eyelids drooped. A second shower revived her, languid and indulgent, with Leela's handmade soap scented of eucalyptus and honey. The sapphire chiffon dress glided on like a second skin, its neckline a gentle plunge that bared the locket's gleam. Leela appeared in the doorway, bearing a velvet box. "For you, a touch of magic." Inside lay a cashmere wrap, midnight blue embroidered with silver constellations. "Leela, it's exquisite. No arguments, you deserve this sparkle." Clara draped it over her shoulders, the fabric a constellation of its own. At 7 p.m., they stepped into the twilight, Leela's vintage convertible purring to life. "Where to?" Clara ventured, the wind teasing her hair. Leela's grin was impish, a echo of their sorority days. "Patience, darling, Asheville's secrets unfold slowly." The road climbed into the Blue Ridge foothills, past meadows silvered by moonlight, until they crested a ridge overlooking the city. Nestled there was the Grove Park Inn, a sprawling arts and crafts palace of granite and gables, its great hall aglow with a 36-foot Christmas tree adorned in hand-blown ornaments. Carolers in Victorian garb harmonized, "O Holy Night," beneath chandeliers that dripped like frozen waterfalls. The air hummed with clinking glasses and hushed awe. Leela navigated them to the inn's sunset terrace, a glass-enclosed area where heaters banished the December bite. Tables were swathed in damask, laden with feasts, roast goose glazed in honey, truffled mashed potatoes, pecan-crusted salmon, and towers of Yule log cake veiled in meringue snow. Candlelight danced across crystal, casting faces in golden halos. As they settled with champagne flutes, bubbles fizzing like unspoken wishes, a string quartet struck up Vivaldi's Winter, the notes weaving through the laughter. It was there, amid the symphony of silverware and strings, that Clara first noticed him. He sat alone at a corner table, a leather-bound journal open before him, pen poised as if capturing the scene in verse. Mid-60s, perhaps, with salt-and-pepper hair tousled by the mountain breeze, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that spoke of scholarly debates. His suit was tweed, elbow-patched and timeless, a burgundy tie loosened like an afterthought. But it was his eyes, storm-gray, crinkled at the edges with quiet humor, that held her. He glanced up, caught her gaze, and offered a nod, subtle as a secret shared. Leela, ever the alchemist, leaned in. "Go say hello. The night's young." Clara demurred, cheeks flushing, but fate or Leela's subtle nudge conspired. As the quartet paused, a waiter misdirected a bread basket to their table. In retrieving it, the stranger rose, his voice a baritone rumble warmed by a faint Scottish lilt. "Forgive the intrusion. Seems I've claimed the wrong territory." Up close, he smelled of sandalwood and aged paper, lines around his mouth etched by smiles more than scowls. "Clara," she said, extending a hand, her pulse a staccato. And no territory claimed, merely borrowed for the evening. His grip was firm, lingering a beat. Finn Gallagher, escaped professor, occasional poet, perpetual wanderer. They fell into conversation as if resuming an old thread. Asheville's literary ghosts, Thomas Wolfe's shadow on Market Street, her love for impressionist oils, his for Celtic myths, the ache of widowhood, shared in veiled confessions rather than raw edges. Leela, with a wink, excused herself to powder her mischief, leaving them to the terrace's spell. Finn spoke of his life in Boston, a tenured chair in folklore vacated for sabbaticals that stretched into reinventions. After Margaret, my wife, left us 5 years back, I learned the folly of maps. Better to let the road choose you, Clara nodded, tracing the rim of her glass. Thomas was my compass. Without him I became, unmoored, a fixture in someone else's story. Their words bridged chasms, the loneliness of empty nests, the sting of adult children who drift like kites cut loose. Ethan, she confessed lightly, was rediscovering himself at his in-laws. Finn chuckled. My daughter, Siobhan, is much the same, wed to a tech whiz in Silicon Valley, their holidays more Zoom than hearth. We parented them to fly, now we ache for the echo of wings. Dessert arrived unbidden, a shared creme brulee, its caramel crust shattering under spoons like fragile illusions. As fireworks bloomed over the valley, Asheville's midnight salute to the solstice, Finn extended an invitation. Tomorrow, if you're willing, there's a trail in the Pisgah Forest. Nothing strenuous, a wander to Looking Glass Falls. Water over stone, Clara. It reminds us we're not so fixed as we fear. She accepted, the yes blooming in her chest like the camellias in Leela's garden. Christmas Day dawned crystalline, the bungalow swathed in hoarfrost. Leela's breakfast was a ritual. Buckwheat pancakes with maple from local trees, bacon crisp as autumn leaves, and mimosas fizzing with optimism. Details, woman, Leela demanded over coffee, her eyes alight. Clara obliged, painting Finn in broad strokes, the lilt in his laugh, the way his anecdotes unfurled like sonnets. Good, Leela pronounced. Now go claim your chapter. The trailhead awaited under a powder blue sky, Finn's pickup truck a relic of 70s Americana, its bed laden with thermoses of Irish breakfast tea. They hiked in companionable rhythm, boots crunching leaf litter, the forest a cathedral of rhododendrons and hemlocks. Conversation flowed freer here, unencumbered by linen and lights. Her sketches of Paris cafes, abandoned for domesticity. His unpublished chapbook on selkies, seals who shed skins for love. At the falls, mist-shrouded and roaring, they paused on a mossy outcrop. Thomas would have loved this, Clara murmured, the words a bridge to vulnerability. Finn's hand brushed hers, tentative. And he'd be proud of the woman stepping into the spray, not shrinking from it. They lunched at a roadside diner, grilled pimento cheese sandwiches, collared tangy with vinegar, then parted with a promise. New Year's at his cabin in the Smokies. Back at Leela's, Clara unpacked not just clothes, but burdens. Evenings blurred into a montage of Asheville's pulse. A bluegrass jam in a basement speakeasy, where Finn pulled her into a two-step, his palm warm on her waist. A gallery crawl, fingers interlacing amid oils of misty peaks. Midnight mass at the Basilica, candles flickering like stars reclaimed. By December 28th, when Ethan texted a perfunctory "home safe," "House okay?" Clara's reply was a haiku of brevity. "Fine, enjoyed my time away." No pleas, no bridges mended prematurely. She was learning. Love didn't demand erasure. The return train to New York was bittersweet. Finn's goodbye a kiss on the platform, soft, lingering, a question wrapped in certainty. "Boston's but a flight away," he whispered. "Or Asheville, for that matter, where the road leads next." Clara smiled, the wrap from Leela clutched like a talisman. "Wherever it doesn't ask me to vanish." Back in the brownstone, the air was stale, the note long crumbled in the trash. Ethan and Miranda had left traces, a half-eaten fruitcake, a forgotten scarf. But Clara moved differently, straight-backed, humming Vivaldi. She retrieved the ballerina from the attic, placing her on the mantel. The teacups, mended with gold kintsugi, found a shelf. And the dresser? She'd sell it, buy a smaller one etched with her initials alone. Spring came with letters from Finn, postcards of Highland heather, drafts of poems invoking a woman of garnet and grace. Ethan called sporadically, his voice thawing. "Missed you at Christmas, Mom." Miranda's barbs softened to queries. But Clara's anchor was her own. Weekends in Asheville, summers tracing Finn's ancestral trails in Ireland, autumns painting en plein air while he read aloud. Years folded like the pages of a well-loved book. At 70, Clara stood in an Edinburgh garden, Finn's hand in hers, vowing not eternity but the now, the fierce, fleeting beauty of skis unclaimed. Ethan, softened by time and a daughter of his own, visited with stories of bridges rebuilt. Miranda even complimented the vintage charm of the ballerina. In the end, it wasn't the leaving that saved her, but the arriving at herself at last. And in the quiet of her room, long after the floods had receded, Clara would sometimes hear Thomas's voice on the wind. "Wander, my love. The world was always yours." Echoes of Evergreen. The current date is December 24th, but for Margaret Maggie Harlow, it might as well have been any other gray Tuesday in her endless string of Tuesdays. At 70, she had long since stopped counting the holidays that blurred into one another like smudged watercolors. Her life in the sprawling colonial house on Elm Street in suburban Boston had become a quiet prison of polished oak floors and unspoken resentments. The house wasn't hers anymore, not really. It belonged to her son, Robert, and his wife, Claire, who had moved in 3 years ago under the guise of helping out after Maggie's husband, Tom, passed from a sudden heart attack. What started as temporary support had morphed into a suffocating takeover. Robert, the golden boy turned mid-level accountant, and Claire, the sharp-tongued interior designer with a Pinterest-perfect life, had slowly erased every trace of Maggie from her own home. The sideboard in the dining room, Tom's pride and joy, hand-carved from walnut during their honeymoon road trip through Vermont, was the first casualty. "It's so dated, Mom," Claire had said one crisp autumn morning, her voice dripping with that faux sympathy Maggie had come to loathe. "We need space for the new china. Yours is quaint, quaint." The word stung like salt in a paper cut. Maggie had watched, mute, as the movers hauled it to the garage, along with the mismatched plates from their early marriage, chipped from too many laughter-filled dinners. Now, the dining room gleamed with Claire's minimalist aesthetic, sleek white cabinets, abstract art prints in frames that cost more than Maggie's monthly grocery budget, and a perpetual chill that no amount of central heating could thaw. Christmas Eve dinner had been the breaking point. Robert and Claire hosted their annual intimate gathering, code for inviting a dozen of Claire's yoga studio colleagues and Robert's golf buddies, all under 50, all sipping artisanal cocktails from coupes that matched the ice bucket. Maggie had spent the afternoon in the kitchen, her arthritic hands chopping onions for the stuffing, basting the turkey that Claire insisted on calling organic free-range heritage bird. But when the guests arrived, Maggie was relegated to the corner, a forgotten appetizer tray in her lap like a shield. "Oh, Maggie's just helping out," Claire trilled to a cluster of women in cashmere sweaters, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. Helping out. As if she were the hired help in her own home. The sentence that shattered her came midway through the meal. Claire, flushed from her third gin fizz, leaned across the table, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the chandelier light. "Maggie, dear, could you clear the first course? The plates are looking a tad." Lived in. Maggie's fork hovered over her untouched salmon. The room fell into a polite hush, eyes darting like minnows. Robert cleared his throat, avoiding her gaze. "Yeah, Mom, thanks, we'll handle dessert." Maggie rose mechanically, stacking plates with hands that trembled not from age, but from the raw, exposed wound of invisibility. In that moment, she saw it clearly. She was the relic, the outdated fixture they tolerated until they didn't. The turkey cooled untouched on her plate as she retreated to the basement guest room, Claire's office space, repurposed with a futon and a single bulb. That night, alone in the damp chill, Maggie made the call she'd been rehearsing in her head for months. Her voice, steady despite the ache in her chest, cut through the static. "Susan, it's Maggie, I need a lifeline. Can I come to Asheville? Just for Christmas?" Susan Whittaker, her college roommate from the wild, unfiltered days at Smith, had been Maggie's anchor through Tom's illness, the empty nest, and now this slow erosion of self. "Darling," Susan had replied without hesitation, her southern drawl wrapping around Maggie like a quilt. "The mountains are waiting. Pack light, we've got snow in the forecast and more wine than we can drink." By noon the next day, Maggie was on a flight south, her one suitcase stuffed with wool sweaters, a dog-eared copy of Anne of Green Gables, and the gold locket Tom had given her on their 40th anniversary. Asheville welcomed her with open arms. Mist-shrouded Blue Ridge peaks dusted in fresh powder, streets alive with buskers strumming folk tunes under strings of Edison bulbs. Susan's bungalow on Montfort Avenue was a riot of color. Hand-thrown pottery on every shelf, Afghans knitted from thrift store yarns, and a Christmas tree so gloriously crooked it leaned like a tipsy philosopher. "No minimalism here, love," Susan declared, pulling Maggie into a hug that smelled of lavender and wood smoke. At 69, Susan was a retired botanist, her silver curls framing a face etched with laugh lines and the faint scars of a life fully lived. Divorced twice, childless by choice, she had built a world of chosen family, artists, hikers, and fellow widows who gathered like fireflies around her hearth. "You're wearing it tonight," Susan said that evening, holding up an emerald velvet dress Maggie had bought on a whim in the 90s and never worn. "You are going to shine." Maggie hesitated, her reflection in the mirror showing a woman with tired eyes and shoulders bowed from years of yeses. But Susan's gaze was fierce, unyielding. "Enough hiding, Mags. This is Christmas with soul, not Claire's sterile Pinterest board." At 7:15 p.m., they stepped out into the frosted air. Asheville's streets glowed with lanterns strung between historic oaks, families bundled in scarves strolling arm in arm. Vendors hawked mugs of spiced mulled wine and warm beignets dusted with powdered sugar, their steam curling like ghosts in the twilight. Carols drifted from the Basilica of St. Lawrence, the organ's swell mingling with laughter from open porches. It was Christmas as Maggie remembered it from her girlhood in Maine, messy, magical, alive. "Where are we headed?" she asked, her breath fogging the air. "To Alina and Marcus's place," Susan replied, linking arms. "Old friends you'll adore. They throw this potluck bash every year, food that'll make you weep, company that sticks to your ribs." She shot Maggie a sidelong glance, mischief twinkling. "And there's someone I want you to meet." Maggie's stomach fluttered like a trapped bird. "Susan, no, I'm not." "Relax, he's just a pal, retired historian, a widower like you, solid as oak." Susan's tone brooked no argument, and Maggie let it drop, the possibility too fragile to poke at just yet. The house was a restored Victorian on Chestnut Street, its mustard yellow siding aglow against the indigo sky. Laughter spilled from the windows like honey, accompanied by the pluck of a guitar and the clink of glasses. Inside, the living room brimmed with life, 24 souls, from toddlers in elf hats to elders with canes carved like walking sticks. Glasses brimmed with ruby-red sangria. The air hummed with stories half-told and songs half-sung. "Susan," a woman with a cascade of salt and pepper braids enveloped them in a bear hug. "Right on time, and you must be Maggie." Alina's eyes, crinkled at the corners, radiated a warmth that thawed something deep in Maggie's chest. "Welcome, sugar, no strangers here, just kin we ain't met proper yet." Introductions blurred into a whirlwind. A ceramicist named Leela with paint-flecked overalls, a bearded chef named Theo passing trays of truffled gougers, a cluster of grad students debating Borgs over cheese boards. Names evaporated under the assault of kind smiles and firm handshakes, but the hugs lingered, real and unhurried. Then, through the French doors to the wraparound porch, Maggie spotted him. He stood silhouetted against the city lights, tall and lean, his salt and pepper hair swept back from a high forehead. Wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that spoke of scholarly debates won and lost. A forest green cable-knit sweater hugged his frame with the ease of someone who wore comfort like a second skin. His posture was unhurried, one hand in his pocket, the other cradling a tumbler of bourbon, elegant without effort, like a tree rooted deep after storms. Susan nudged her. "Come on. Let's make magic." He turned at their approach, and when their eyes met, hazel on blue, it wasn't the fireworks of youth. No, Maggie was 70, not 15. It was quieter, surer. A recognition, like two wanderers spotting the same constellation after years adrift. Her soul whispered, here is one who speaks the dialect of loss, who knows the weight of empty chairs at dawn. "William, meet Maggie. Maggie, this is Will Hawthorne." Susan's voice was a conspirator's hush. "A genuine pleasure," he said, his baritone smooth as aged whiskey, laced with a faint Virginia lilt. He extended a hand. She took it. His grip was steady, warm, not crushing, but present. "The pleasure's entirely mine," she replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Susan melted away with a murmur about fetching more cider, leaving them in the porch's cocoon of wicker chairs and potted evergreens strung with fairy lights. "Susan says you're up from Boston, escaping the rat race." "Something like that." Maggie leaned against the railing, the mountain air crisp on her cheeks. "Needed to breathe, I suppose, fresh air for the lungs and the heart." He nodded as if he'd mapped those very coordinates. "I know the terrain. Came to Asheville 6 years back after Sarah left us. Cancer, quick as a thief. The city lights here, they remind you the world's still turning, even when yours stops." "I'm sorry." The words felt small, but he waved them off gently. "And I'm sorry for whatever storm chased you south." Susan's tight-lipped on details, bless her, but she hinted at rough seas. The porch's seclusion, the bourbon Alina had pressed into her hand earlier, the sheer ordinariness of his gaze, it unlocked something. Maggie spoke, the words tumbling like leaves in wind. The sideboard's exile, the plates stacked in scorn, Claire's velvet-gloved barbs, Robert's averted eyes. Not the full atlas of hurt, but enough to chart the coastline. William listened, chin tilted, eyes never straying. When she trailed off, he exhaled slow and deep. "You know the trap of being the steady one, Maggie? Folks read your quiet as permission to walk over you. Kindness mistaken for doormat. I fell into it hard after Sarah. The kids, twins, both lawyers now, pushed to liquidate the farm in Richmond before her dirt was settled. Dad, memories don't pay taxes," they said, as if grief were a line item to slash. He removed his glasses, polishing them on his sweater's hem, revealing eyes shadowed but kind. "One morning, I stared into the bathroom mirror and saw a ghost. I'd nodded yes to their checklists until I forgot my own voice." "What pulled you out?" Maggie asked, leaning closer despite herself. "I sold nothing. Packed a truck with books and her old Martin guitar, drove west till the mountains called halt. Told the kids the farm was sanctuary, not a state. They fumed, 6 weeks of radio silence. Best stretch I'd had in years." A rueful smile cracked his face. "Then they thawed. Realized Dad wasn't a vault or a valet, he was flesh and bone deserving say-so. Took time, but we rebuilt. Not perfect, but honest." Maggie laughed then, a real, belly-deep sound that startled a mockingbird from the eaves. It had been ages since laughter felt like release, not obligation. "Robert might never get it. He's comfortable in the fog." "That's his fog, not yours," William said softly. "You've a claim on joy, Maggie. Don't let them deed it away." The words landed like embers on dry tinder. Joy. When had she traded hers for their peace? Dinner summoned them inside. Platters of herb-crusted leg of lamb, wild mushroom risotto creamy as sin, collard simmered with smoked turkey, cornbread sticky with honey butter, and pecan pie so rich it sang of southern sins forgiven. Spiked eggnog flowed, stories unfurled like ribbons. William claimed the seat beside her, their conversation a meandering river. His lectures on Civil War letters at UNC Asheville, her volunteer days curating exhibits at the Boston Athenaeum, debates over Wolfe versus Wharton, rambles through Patagonia versus the Maine coast, the alchemy of a perfect gumbo. No coy glances, no rehearsed lines, just two souls trading maps over forkfuls of pie. But when their fingers brushed over the breadbasket, a spark jumped. Not fire, but the steady glow of a hearth rekindled. Hope, tentative and warm. By 11, Alina hauled out her vintage Polaroid. "Group shot, y'all, porch assembly." The crowd spilled out, breath clouds mingling with pipe smoke. Susan tugged Maggie front and center. William settled beside her on the glider, their shoulders brushing. "Say Yuletide yarn spinners." Flash pop. "One more for the stragglers." Maggie perched on the glider's edge, William beside her, the Asheville skyline a necklace of twinkling lights below. Susan snapped it with Maggie's phone. "Frame-worthy," she whispered, winking. The walk home was a slow waltz down lantern-lit lanes, snowflakes beginning their lazy descent. "So, verdict on Will," Susan prodded. "He's thoughtful, real." Maggie shrugged, cheeks flushed from cold or company she couldn't say. Susan chuckled. "Thoughtful's a start. At 70, darling, real's the whole feast." Maggie snorted, but in the quiet of her borrowed room, heart thrumming, she admitted the truth. Excitement that sly thief had slipped back in. Before bed, she glanced at her phone, first time all day. No texts from Robert, no voicemails from Claire. Expected, but the ache was duller now, like a bruise fatting. She drifted off to dreams of green ridges and green eyes. December 25th dawned golden, sunlight spilling through lace curtains like liquid honey, the sort of light Maggie hadn't savored since Tom's last spring. When she'd flung open windows to chase shadows. No frantic checklists, no guilt knots twisting her gut, just the scent of chicory coffee wafting up from below. She padded downstairs in flannel pajamas, unthinkable at home, where Claire's lectures on ageless poise loomed like storm clouds. Susan presided over the kitchen like a benevolent witch, flipping latkes in a cast-iron skillet, her apron dusted with flour. "Morning glory," Susan sang, "slept like the dead." Like the living, for once. Maggie sank into a booth, cradling the mug Susan slid over. Black, strong, no frills, just right. Susan beamed. Ghost-free slumber's the best medicine, feeling. Lighter, actual. A pause. "You posted the pics from last night." "Guilty. Social media's my vice, spreads joy faster than flu." She fished out her tablet, swiping to Maggie's Facebook. There it was, the porch shot, Maggie and William side by side, her in the emerald dress aglow, him in his sweater like a sentinel. Asheville's lights haloed them, snowflakes blurring the edges into a dreamscape. But the caption, Susan's handiwork, hit like a rogue wave, merriest Christmas in ages. Cheers to new chapters and kind souls like Will. Grateful. Sparkles. Maggie's throat tightened. "Susan, why?" "Because it's gospel, Mags. You glowed last night. He helped fan the flame." A conspiratorial grin. "And honey, nothing wrong with a little truth-telling." Truth-telling. The post had erupted. 612 likes, 89 comments. Maggie scrolled, a reluctant smile tugging. "Maggie, you radiant queen. Spill the tea on Asheville magic." "Tessa, old book club pal, looking fierce lady. Who's the silver fox, Mary?" "Lena, the librarian, Aunt Mags, slaying at 70, secret beau." Smirking face, Jenna, Robert's cousin. Warmth bloomed, unexpected and fierce. These were threads from her tapestry, frayed but not severed. Then the chill, Maggie, call home. Robert's asking around, saw the pic. Worried. "B, the bridge club maven, timestamp 8:47, Maggie's pulse quickened. She snatched her phone from the charger, silent mode since touchdown. Unlocking revealed the deluge. 19 missed calls from Robert, 12 from Claire, a voicemail cluster blinking red. WhatsApp first. Robert's arc from concern to chaos. 7:15 a.m. Mom, house empty. Where? 7:58 a.m. saw FB. That guy who? 9:03 a.m. Mom, pick up. Claire's flipping. Claire's were scalpels. 8:42 a.m. Margaret, this optics disaster. At your age, 9:11, neighbors texting, explain the man. Now, 9:47 a.m. reckless. Family first. The room spun. Susan peered over, concern etching her brow. Storm brewing. Maggie thrust the screen forward. Susan scanned, then huffed a laugh. Predictable as a Hallmark plot. Let it brew, your tea's too fine to drown. The phone erupted, Robert's name, his profile pic from a decade ago, grinning at a Red Sox game. Susan's hand covered hers. Answer on your turf, love, throne's yours. Maggie inhaled the morning's promise, exhaled the old chains, swiped. Hello. Mom, Jesus, why ghost us? Robert's bark laced with static panic. Claire's murmur in the wings, tell her Rob embarrassing. Good morning, Robert, Merry Christmas. Calm as mountain mist. Mary, Mom, where the hell are you? That photo, some dude, on Christmas. Asheville with Susan, celebrating, and Will's a friend, kind one. The words armored her. Friend, Claire commandeered the speaker, voice a whip crack. Margaret, you vanish post this. Spectacle, we're mortified. Family inquiries pouring in, what'll they think? Maggie stepped to the sun porch, glass doors muffling the fray. Sun warmed her face, birdsong filtered through. Clarity crystallized. Mortified, by what precisely? Me, smiling, breathing free. You, gallivanting with a stranger. At 70, without a word. Claire's pitch rose, fraying. Gallivanting, Maggie echoed, steel threading her tone. Curious, since you two jetted to the Keys last Christmas sans invite. My house, my holiday, poof. That's business networking. Robert interjected, flailing. Different, Mom, we're partners. Partners? She paced the rug, woven with autumn leaves. And I'm the silent investor, funding your networking with my equity, my silence. Susan hovered at the threshold, thumbs up, eyes agleam. Not like that, Robert pleaded, boyish now. We worry you're vulnerable. Vulnerable, the word ignited. Vulnerable to joy, to friends who see me, or to your ledger, Robert. 3 years, $94,200 in transfers. Utilities, your Audi lease, Claire's studio renos. Receipts filed neat as Tom's taxes. Don't lecture sacrifice, I bankrolled yours. What's mine? Scraps and side-eye. Dead air, thick as fog. Claire shattered it. After all we've endured in that mausoleum. Mausoleum, laughter sharp. Its home was, till you redesigned the heart out of it. Robert's voice cracked. Mom, come back, we talk this out, January 2nd. January 3rd, she countered. Face to face, all cards down. Pause, enjoy your day. Click. The phone clattered to the table. Maggie's knees buckled into a wicker chair. Tremors racked her, not fear, but the aftershock of reclamation. Susan enveloped her, murmuring, Hurricane Maggie, epic. Was it, too much, voice wobbly but eyes dry. Necessary, biblical, Susan refilled her mug. They glimpsed the ghosts gone, your flesh again. Notifications pinged, more comments, a few from Robert's circle. Go Maggie, live loud. Uncle Hal, but Maggie set it aside. Power hummed in the pause, the choice. Then a ring, not Robert's. Unknown number, Asheville area code. Heart stutter-stepping, she answered. Hello. Maggie, Will Hawthorne, hope I'm not intruding. Susan slipped me your digits. That pie last night. Still dreaming on it. Fancy a hike tomorrow. Pack a thermos, I've a spot by the French Broad where the cedars whisper secrets. Laughter bubbled, unbidden. Intruding, lifesaver, thermos ready, secrets sound divine. They talked an hour, trails and tailies, birdsong and bourbon recipes, ending with a promise. Dawn pickup, boots laced, world open. Maggie hung up, the sun higher now, gilding the evergreens. She scrolled back to the photo, her and Will framed by light, faces unguarded. Not the image that rankled her family, she realized. It was the subtext. Maggie unbound, radiant without apology. The days blurred into a tapestry of firsts. New Year's dawned with a bonfire at Susan's, Will arriving with fiddles and firecrackers, his laugh mingling with hers over mulled mead. They hiked craggy gardens, boots crunching rhododendron duff, sharing silences as eloquent as sonnets. He spoke of Sarah's wildflower sketches, she of Tom's lighthouse obsession. No rush, no scripts, just orbits aligning. January 3rd, Maggie flew north, steel in her spine. Robert met her at the door, Claire hovering like a specter. The dining room table, cleared of Claire's gewgaws, held coffee and ledgers. Words flew, accusations, apologies half-formed. Robert wept, admitting the drift. Claire's barbs softened to admissions of her own fears, career stalls, the terror of middling. Maggie laid boundaries like bricks, rent retroactive, the basement her domain again, holidays shared or separate by consent. The sideboard returned, dusted and defiant, plates reclaimed their shelves. Not fairy tale neat. Robert bristled at terms, Claire decamped to her sister's for a week, but seeds took root. Robert texted mid-month, Mom, dinner, just us? Claire mailed a card stiff, but signed with respect, see. Enclosing a pottery mug from Asheville, Susan's stamp faint on the base. By spring, the house breathed easier. Maggie gardened the front beds, tulips nodding like old friends. Will visited in May, his rental car stuffed with Virginia hams and history tomes. They toured the Athenaeum, his hand steady on her elbow up the marble steps. That summer she drove south, Asheville's pull magnetic, staying in Susan's guest cottage, Will's farm a day trip away. They canoed the New River, her laughter echoing off bluffs, picnicked under dogwoods, debating Austin over ambrosia salad. Fall brought Robert's olive branch. A weekend in Boston, Claire in tow, touring the Isabella Stewart Gardner, Claire's pick, a nod to Maggie's curator days. Awkward at edges but genuine at core. You look happy, Mom, Robert said over cannoli, eyes searching. I am, she replied, simple as truth. Learning late but learning. By Christmas, That next one, a year on Maggie's tree, skewed gloriously off-kilter in the living room, ornaments from Tom's toolbox mingling with Susan's quirky baubles. Robert and Claire arrived early, arms laden with pies, no speeches prepped. Will flew up, his sweater swapped for a tweed jacket, fitting seamless into the fray. They gathered round, stories swapped, carols mangled, the sideboard groaning under turkey and toffee. Later, on the porch swing, snow dusting the elms, Maggie leaned into Will's shoulder. "Think we earned this?" His fingers traced her knuckles. "Earned, darling, we claimed it, soul deep." The phone stayed silent that night, no deluges, just a single text from Susan. "Shining yet?" Maggie smiled at the screen, then pocketed it. Some lights needed no glow, they burned steady from within. And in the hush of evergreen echoes, Maggie Harlow finally heard her own. Home, whole hers. Echoes of evergreen. In the quiet folds of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the air carried the sharp scent of pine and the distant hum of a town that never fully slept, lived Eleanor Voss. At 72, she had become a fixture in Asheville, North Carolina, a woman whose life had been etched by the steady chisel of time and loss. Her home, a modest cabin perched on a hillside overlooking the valley, was a sanctuary of sorts, though lately it felt more like a cage. Eleanor's husband, Thomas, had passed 5 years ago, taken by a sudden heart attack during one of their routine hikes along the Appalachian Trail. They had shared 48 years of marriage, filled with laughter, arguments, and the kind of deep-rooted companionship that only decades could forge. Without him, the world had dimmed, colors bleeding into grays, and joy seemed like a distant memory, something belonging to the young and unbroken. Eleanor was not one to wallow openly. She kept busy with her garden in the summers, tending to heirloom tomatoes and wildflowers that attracted hummingbirds. In winters, she volunteered at the local library, organizing story hours for children and recommending books to patrons who reminded her of her younger self, eager, wide-eyed, full of dreams. Her silver hair, once a vibrant auburn, was now pulled into a loose bun, and her eyes, a soft hazel flecked with gold, held a quiet intelligence that drew people in. But beneath that calm exterior lay a well of sorrow, a loneliness that whispered in the empty rooms of her home. Holidays were the hardest. Christmas, with its insistence on cheer and family, felt like a cruel reminder of what was missing. This year, however, something shifted. It started with an invitation from her old friend Clara, a boisterous artist in her 60s who ran a pottery studio downtown. "Eleanor, darling, you can't spend another Christmas alone with your books and that ancient cat of yours," Clara had said over the phone, her voice crackling with enthusiasm. "We're having a potluck at my place, up on the mountain, overlooking the city. Bring your famous apple pie and maybe that bottle of bourbon you've been hiding. There'll be music, stories, and who knows, maybe a little magic." Eleanor had hesitated. Magic, at her age. But Clara was persistent, and deep down, Eleanor craved the warmth of human connection. So she baked the pie, dusted off a deep burgundy dress that hugged her still graceful figure, and wrapped herself in a knitted shawl her daughter had sent from Seattle. Her children, 2 sons and a daughter, lived scattered across the country, busy with their own lives. They called, sent cards, but the distance was more than miles. It was the inevitable drift of generations. The drive up the winding roads to Clara's cabin was treacherous with fresh snow, but Eleanor navigated it with the steady hand of someone who had lived in these mountains all her life. As she arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Clara's home was alive with light, fairy strings draped over the porch railings, twinkling like captured stars. Potted evergreens flanked the entrance, their branches dusted with snow, and the air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Inside, the potluck was in full swing. Friends from town, artists, writers, retirees like herself, milled about in colorful sweaters and scarves. A crooked Christmas tree stood in the corner, adorned with mismatched ornaments, handmade clay stars from Clara's studio, faded glass baubles from thrift shops, even a few quirky ones shaped like mountain goats and banjos, nodding to Asheville's eclectic spirit. Laughter echoed off the wooden walls as people shared stories around a crackling fireplace. A guitarist strummed folk tunes, and someone had set up a makeshift buffet with dishes ranging from vegan casseroles to hearty venison stew. Eleanor placed her pie on the table, feeling a tentative spark of belonging as old acquaintances greeted her with hugs and compliments. That's when she noticed him, Jacob Ellis. He was new to town, or at least new to her circle. Tall and lean, with a mop of silver hair that fell slightly over his forehead and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of thoughtful academia, Jacob was a widower himself, having lost his wife to cancer 3 years prior. He had moved to Asheville from Charleston, seeking solace in the mountain's embrace. Clara had introduced him as our resident historian, someone who spent his days researching the region's forgotten trails and ghost towns. He wore a charcoal gray turtleneck sweater that accentuated his broad shoulders, and his eyes, deep blue like the twilight sky, held a gentle wisdom. They met by the buffet table, both reaching for the last slice of quiche. "After you," Jacob said with a warm smile, his voice carrying a faint southern drawl that reminded Eleanor of lazy summer evenings long past. "No, please," she replied, her cheeks flushing slightly, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. "I've already sampled too much." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that eased the tension. "Well, in that case, let's split it. Fair's fair." What followed was a conversation that flowed like a gentle stream. They talked about books. Eleanor loved poetry. Jacob favored historical biographies. They shared stories of their travels, her backpacking adventures with Thomas in Europe, his solo road trips along the coast after his wife's passing. There was no awkward probing, no forced sympathy, just an easy understanding, as if they had known each other for ages. As the evening deepened, the group migrated to games and carols, but Eleanor felt the need for air. The cabin, though cozy, was growing stuffy with the press of bodies and the heat from the fire. She slipped out onto the porch, where the night had fully claimed the sky. Snowflakes danced lazily in the air, catching the glow of the fairy lights. Below, Asheville sprawled like a glittering jewel box, its golden lights piercing the misty veil that hung over the valley. The cold was invigorating, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside. She settled onto a weathered wooden bench, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Moments later, the door creaked open and Jacob emerged, carrying 2 mugs of steaming mulled wine. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his breath visible in the crisp air. "Not at all," she said, surprised by how natural it felt. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing briefly, a spark of electricity that made her heart skip. They sat in companionable silence at first, sipping the spiced wine, watching the snow settle on the evergreens. A vintage record player inside played faint strains of jazz, mingling with the laughter spilling through the amber-lit windows. "You know," Jacob said after a while, his voice soft, "I came here tonight thinking it'd be just another gathering. Polite chit-chat, good food, home by 10, but talking with you. It's like finding a chapter in a book you didn't know was missing." Eleanor turned to him, her hazel eyes meeting his blue ones. There was no possession in his gaze, no demand, just a quiet recognition of shared paths. She smiled, a subtle curve of her lips that lit her face with a luminous calm. "I've spent so long in the shadows of what was," she admitted. "Thomas was my everything, losing him. It broke something in me. But tonight, out here with the snow and the lights, it feels like maybe I'm mending." Jacob nodded, placing his hand gently over hers. It was warm, steady, a gesture of solidarity rather than romance, though the seeds of something more were undeniably planted. "My Ellen used to say life is like these mountains, full of valleys and peaks. We get stuck in the lows sometimes, but the view from the top, worth every step." They sat like that as the snow continued to fall, soft and unhurried. Nearby, on a small wicker table, rested an old leather-bound journal Jacob had brought, filled with sketches of forgotten trails. Inside, the potluck carried on. Friends clinking glasses, sharing toasts to new beginnings, the Christmas trees' lights casting playful shadows on the walls. For Eleanor, this moment was more than a fleeting connection. It was a rebirth. Not an erasure of her past sorrows, but a gentle weaving of them into something new. The solitude that had defined her winters was transforming into a shared quietude, rich with possibility. As the clock struck midnight, marking the true heart of Christmas, she felt a surge of resilience, a reclaiming of her spirit amid the evergreen echoes of the mountains. The night stretched on, filled with more stories exchanged under the fairy lights. Jacob spoke of his plans to hike the trails come spring, inviting her along. Alina, for the first time in years, said yes without hesitation. They parted with a promise to meet again, perhaps at the library or over coffee downtown. As she drove home through the snow-dusted roads, the city lights fading in her rear view, Alina felt alive. The world, once gray, now shimmered with golden tones, like the dawn after a long night. In the months that followed, their friendship blossomed into a tender romance, one built on mutual respect and the wisdom of lives well lived. They explored Asheville's hidden gems, art galleries, craft breweries, the winding paths of the Biltmore estate. Jacob introduced her to stargazing from remote overlooks, where they lay on blankets, tracing constellations and sharing dreams deferred. Alina, in turn, showed him her garden, teaching him the art of planting bulbs that would bloom in defiance of winter's grip. There were challenges, of course. Alina's children were wary at first, protective of their mother's heart. But visits from them softened the edges, family dinners where Jacob's stories charmed them, proving he was no replacement for Thomas, but a new chapter. Jacob's own family, a daughter in New York, encouraged him, seeing the light return to his eyes. Through it all, that Christmas night on the porch remained their touchstone, a symbol of renewal. They returned to Clara's cabin the following year, this time hand in hand, hosting the potluck themselves. The snow fell just as softly, the lights twinkled with the same magic, and in the quiet moments, they shared smiles that spoke volumes. Alina's life, once defined by loss, had become a testament to resilience. In the echoes of Evergreen, she found not just love, but the courage to embrace joy anew. And in Asheville's misty mountains, where winters whispered of endings and beginnings, her spirit soared free, echoes of Evergreen. In the quiet folds of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the air carried the sharp scent of pine and the distant hum of a town that never fully slept, lived Alina Voss. At 72, she had become a fixture in Asheville, North Carolina, a woman whose life had been etched by the steady chisel of time and loss. Her home, a modest cabin perched on a hillside overlooking the valley, was a sanctuary of sorts, though lately it felt more like a cage. Alina's husband, Thomas, had passed 5 years ago, taken by a sudden heart attack during one of their routine hikes along the Appalachian Trail. They had shared 48 years of marriage, filled with laughter, arguments, and the kind of deep-rooted companionship that only decades could forge. Without him, the world had dimmed, colors bleeding into grays, and joy seemed like a distant memory, something belonging to the young and unbroken. Alina was not one to wallow openly. She kept busy with her garden in the summers, tending to heirloom tomatoes and wildflowers that attracted hummingbirds. In winters, she volunteered at the local library, organizing story hours for children and recommending books to patrons who reminded her of her younger self, eager, wide-eyed, full of dreams. Her silver hair, once a vibrant auburn, was now pulled into a loose bun, and her eyes, a soft hazel flecked with gold, held a quiet intelligence that drew people in. But beneath that calm exterior lay a well of sorrow, a loneliness that whispered in the empty rooms of her home. Holidays were the hardest. Christmas, with its insistence on cheer and family, felt like a cruel reminder of what was missing. This year, however, something shifted. It started with an invitation from her old friend Clara, a boisterous artist in her 60s who ran a pottery studio downtown. "Alina, darling, you can't spend another Christmas alone with your books and that ancient cat of yours," Clara had said over the phone, her voice crackling with enthusiasm. "We're having a potluck at my place, up on the mountain, overlooking the city. Bring your famous apple pie and maybe that bottle of bourbon you've been hiding. There'll be music, stories, and who knows, maybe a little magic." Alina had hesitated. Magic, at her age. But Clara was persistent, and deep down, Alina craved the warmth of human connection. So she baked the pie, dusted off a deep burgundy dress that hugged her still graceful figure, and wrapped herself in a knitted shawl her daughter had sent from Seattle. Her children, 2 sons and a daughter, lived scattered across the country, busy with their own lives. They called, sent cards, but the distance was more than miles. It was the inevitable drift of generations. The drive up the winding roads to Clara's cabin was treacherous with fresh snow, but Alina navigated it with the steady hand of someone who had lived in these mountains all her life. As she arrived, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose. Clara's home was alive with light, fairy strings draped over the porch railings, twinkling like captured stars. Potted evergreens flanked the entrance, their branches dusted with snow, and the air smelled of cinnamon and wood smoke. Inside, the potluck was in full swing. Friends from town, artists, writers, retirees like herself, milled about in colorful sweaters and scarves. A crooked Christmas tree stood in the corner, adorned with mismatched ornaments. Handmade clay stars from Clara's studio, faded glass baubles from thrift shops, even a few quirky ones shaped like mountain goats and banjos, nodding to Asheville's eclectic spirit. Laughter echoed off the wooden walls as people shared stories around a crackling fireplace. A guitarist strummed folk tunes, and someone had set up a makeshift buffet with dishes ranging from vegan casseroles to hearty venison stew. Eleanor placed her pie on the table, feeling a tentative spark of belonging as old acquaintances greeted her with hugs and compliments. That's when she noticed him, Jacob Ellis. He was new to town, or at least new to her circle. Tall and lean, with a mop of silver hair that fell slightly over his forehead and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of thoughtful academia, Jacob was a widower himself, having lost his wife to cancer 3 years prior. He had moved to Asheville from Charleston, seeking solace in the mountain's embrace. Clara had introduced him as our resident historian, someone who spent his days researching the region's forgotten trails and ghost towns. He wore a charcoal gray turtleneck sweater that accentuated his broad shoulders, and his eyes, deep blue like the twilight sky, held a gentle wisdom. They met by the buffet table, both reaching for the last slice of quiche. "After you," Jacob said with a warm smile, his voice carrying a faint southern drawl that reminded Eleanor of lazy summer evenings long past. "No, please," she replied, her cheeks flushing slightly, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. "I've already sampled too much." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that eased the tension. "Well, in that case, let's split it. Fair's fair." What followed was a conversation that flowed like a gentle stream. They talked about books. Eleanor loved poetry. Jacob favored historical biographies. They shared stories of their travels, her backpacking adventures with Thomas in Europe, his solo road trips along the coast after his wife's passing. There was no awkward probing, no forced sympathy, just an easy understanding, as if they had known each other for ages. As the evening deepened, the group migrated to games and carols, but Eleanor felt the need for air. The cabin, though cozy, was growing stuffy with the press of bodies and the heat from the fire. She slipped out onto the porch, where the night had fully claimed the sky. Snowflakes danced lazily in the air, catching the glow of the fairy lights. Below, Asheville sprawled like a glittering jewel box, its golden lights piercing the misty veil that hung over the valley. The cold was invigorating, a sharp contrast to the warmth inside. She settled onto a weathered wooden bench, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Moments later, the door creaked open and Jacob emerged, carrying 2 mugs of steaming mulled wine. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his breath visible in the crisp air. "Not at all," she said, surprised by how natural it felt. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing briefly, a spark of electricity that made her heart skip. They sat in companionable silence at first, sipping the spiced wine, watching the snow settle on the evergreens. A vintage record player inside played faint strains of jazz, mingling with the laughter spilling through the amber-lit windows. "You know," Jacob said after a while, his voice soft, "I came here tonight thinking it'd be just another gathering. Polite chit-chat, good food, home by 10, but talking with you. It's like finding a chapter in a book you didn't know was missing." Eleanor turned to him, her hazel eyes meeting his blue ones. There was no possession in his gaze, no demand, just a quiet recognition of shared paths. She smiled, a subtle curve of her lips that lit her face with a luminous calm. "I've spent so long in the shadows of what was," she admitted. "Thomas was my everything, losing him. It broke something in me. But tonight, out here with the snow and the lights, it feels like maybe I'm mending." Jacob nodded, placing his hand gently over hers. It was warm, steady, a gesture of solidarity rather than romance, though the seeds of something more were undeniably planted. "My Ellen used to say life is like these mountains, full of valleys and peaks. We get stuck in the lows sometimes, but the view from the top, worth every step." They sat like that as the snow continued to fall, soft and unhurried. Nearby, on a small wicker table, rested an old leather-bound journal Jacob had brought, filled with sketches of forgotten trails. Inside, the potluck carried on. Friends clinking glasses, sharing toasts to new beginnings, the Christmas trees' lights casting playful shadows on the walls. For Alina, this moment was more than a fleeting connection. It was a rebirth. Not an erasure of her past sorrows, but a gentle weaving of them into something new. The solitude that had defined her winters was transforming into a shared quietude, rich with possibility. As the clock struck midnight, marking the true heart of Christmas, she felt a surge of resilience, a reclaiming of her spirit amid the evergreen echoes of the mountains. The night stretched on, filled with more stories exchanged under the fairy lights. Jacob spoke of his plans to hike the trails come spring, inviting her along. Alina, for the first time in years, said yes without hesitation. They parted with a promise to meet again, perhaps at the library or over coffee downtown. As she drove home through the snow-dusted roads, the city lights fading in her rear view, Alina felt alive. The world, once gray, now shimmered with golden tones, like the dawn after a long night. In the months that followed, their friendship blossomed into a tender romance, one built on mutual respect and the wisdom of lives well lived. They explored Asheville's hidden gems, art galleries, craft breweries, the winding paths of the Biltmore estate. Jacob introduced her to stargazing from remote overlooks, where they lay on blankets, tracing constellations and sharing dreams deferred. Alina, in turn, showed him her garden, teaching him the art of planting bulbs that would bloom in defiance of winter's grip. There were challenges, of course. Alina's children were wary at first, protective of their mother's heart. But visits from them softened the edges, family dinners where Jacob's stories charmed them, proving he was no replacement for Thomas, but a new chapter. Jacob's own family, a daughter in New York, encouraged him, seeing the light return to his eyes. Through it all, that Christmas night on the porch remained their touchstone, a symbol of renewal. They returned to Clara's cabin the following year, this time hand in hand, hosting the potluck themselves. The snow fell just as softly, the lights twinkled with the same magic, and in the quiet moments, they shared smiles that spoke volumes. Alina's life, once defined by loss, had become a testament to resilience. In the echoes of Evergreen, she found not just love, but the courage to embrace joy anew. And in Asheville's misty mountains, where winters whispered of endings and beginnings, her spirit soared free. Shadows of Inheritance. Part 1. The Unraveling. It was the evening of December 24, 2024, when Margaret's world began to crack. She had just arrived at her old friend Lydia's cozy cabin in Aspen, Colorado, after a frantic drive from Denver. The snow was falling softly outside, blanketing the world in a serene white hush, but inside Margaret's mind, a storm raged. Her daughter, Sophia, and son-in-law, Victor, had turned what should have been a peaceful holiday into a battlefield. Margaret, at 67, had always prided herself on being the pillar of her family. After her husband, Thomas, passed away from a sudden heart attack 10 years ago, she had thrown herself into supporting Sophia. When Sophia and Victor lost their jobs during the pandemic in 2020, Margaret didn't hesitate. She invited them to move into her spacious Victorian home in Denver, rent-free, until they got back on their feet. "It's temporary," Sophia had promised. But temporary stretched into years. At first, it was bearable. Margaret cooked meals, paid the bills, and even helped with their car payments. But slowly, the gratitude faded. Victor started borrowing tools from her garage without returning them. Sophia sold Margaret's vintage jewelry collection on eBay, claiming it was cluttering the space. Small loans turned into unauthorized charges on Margaret's credit card, $500 for a spa day, $300 for concert tickets. Margaret bit her tongue, telling herself it was for family. But the photo was the breaking point. On Christmas Eve morning, Margaret had posted a picture on Facebook, her smiling with Lydia's neighbor, an old widower named Samuel, at a holiday market. They were just friends, sipping mulled wine and laughing about old times. Harmless, or so she thought. Her phone exploded with messages from Sophia. "Mom, what the hell? Who is that guy? You're embarrassing us." Victor chimed in. "Delete it. People are asking if you're dating some random old man." The calls came next, accusations flying like arrows. "You're acting like a teenager," Sophia screamed. "We live in your house, and this is how you repay us." Margaret hung up, tears streaming. She packed a bag and drove to Lydia's, uninvited but desperate. Lydia, her college roommate turned lifelong confidant, opened the door with open arms. "Come in, Maggie. Whatever it is, we'll fix it." That night, as they sat by the fire with hot toddies, Margaret poured out the story. Lydia listened, her face darkening. "They're using you, Maggie. It's emotional blackmail. You need to set boundaries." The words hit like a revelation. Margaret had always been the giver, the fixer. But now, at 67, she wondered, when do I get to live for me? Part 2, the phone call. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. Lydia's cabin was filled with the scent of cinnamon rolls and pine. They exchanged small gifts, a scarf for Lydia, a book of poetry for Margaret. For the first time in years, Margaret felt light, unburdened. Then her phone rang, an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Hello, Mrs. Harrington. This is Ms. Alina Vasquez, your attorney." Margaret's heart skipped. "Yes, speaking. I apologize for calling on Christmas, but your daughter Sophia stopped by my office yesterday. She was inquiring about your estate plan and the title to your property." The room spun. Sophia at the lawyer's, asking about the will. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing, of course. Client confidentiality. But I thought you should know. We should meet soon to review everything." Margaret thanked her and hung up, her hands trembling. Lydia's face paled as Margaret relayed the news. "That witch! They're plotting to take your house." The pieces clicked. The temporary stay turning permanent, the subtle hints about family inheritance, Victor's recent questions about property values. They weren't just freeloading, they were angling for ownership. Margaret couldn't enjoy the holiday feast Lydia prepared, roast turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce. Her mind raced. She needed proof of their schemes, and with 3 days left in Aspen, she had time to plot. "When they stop getting what they want," Lydia said, quoting an old proverb, "you see their true colors." Part 3, the list and the call. December 26th, 6:15 a.m. Margaret woke before dawn, her sleep fractured by nightmares of eviction from her own home. She brewed coffee in Lydia's kitchen, careful not to wake her friend, and found a worn journal in a drawer. Pen in hand, she began documenting. March 2020. Sophia and Victor move in temporarily after layoffs. May 2020. Victor borrows $1,000 for emergency car repairs, never repaid. July 2021. Sophia sells my grandmother's silverware set for $600, pockets the money. October 2021. Unauthorized credit card charge, $850 for Victor's golf clubs. The list sprawled across pages, missing heirlooms, unpaid utilities, constant demands. At the bottom, December 2024, Sophia visits lawyer about will and deed. Lydia joined her with mugs of tea. "This is abuse, Maggie. Financial, emotional. What now?" "I need to confront them, but with evidence. I can't go back blind." Her phone buzzed. Sophia. Margaret let it ring twice before answering. "Mom, we need to talk." Sophia's voice was strained, almost pleading. "I'm listening." "Not like this. When you get home, please." "Is everything okay?" A pause. Victor's furious. He says that photo was a slap in the face, like you're rubbing our faces in your new life. "Rubbing your faces? I spent Christmas with a friend. That's all." "I know, but he thinks you're changing, becoming distant, selfish." "Selfish for having independence." Another silence. "I just want our family back together." Those words tugged at Margaret's heart, the echo of the little girl she'd raised alone after Thomas's death. But she steeled herself. "Why did you go to my lawyer, Sophia?" Dead air. Then how do you know?" "She's my lawyer. She called me." "Mom, it was Victor's idea. He said we should prepare in case something happens to you." "In case I die. I'm healthy, Sophia. Or are you hopping for sooner?" "No, it's just, we need to know about the house, for security." "Security from what? Me?" Sophia sobbed softly. Victor pushed me. He said you're hiding things that we deserve to know. Margaret's voice hardened. My will is private. My house is mine. If you want to stay, things change. Rules, contributions, respect. What rules? We'll discuss when I return. December 29th, 7 p.m., living room. I love you, Mom. I love you too, but this ends. She hung up empowered. Lydia beamed. That's my girl. That afternoon, they strolled Aspen's streets, galleries, shops, the crisp mountain air. Margaret bought a jade necklace and a wool coat, smiling genuinely for the first time in ages. At dusk, they watched the sunset over the peaks. The saddest part, Margaret said, is realizing I let this happen. It's not too late, Lydia replied. A text pinged. Samuel. Lydia shared your number. Heard about the drama. If you need an ear, I'm here. No strings. Margaret smiled, replying, Thanks, coffee tomorrow. 10 a.m. at the Lodge Cafe. Absolutely. Lydia grinned. Look at you, reclaiming your life. That evening, an email from Ms. Vasquez. Appointment confirmed January 2nd. 9 a.m. Bring all financial docs for will revisions and asset protection. The plan solidified, but Margaret needed irrefutable proof of Victor's manipulations. She had an idea, a hidden recorder app on her phone for the confrontation. Part 4, Coffee and Clarity. December 27th, 10 a.m. The cafe buzzed with skiers and locals. Samuel waited, book in hand, the alchemist. He stood, pulling out her chair. You look rested, he said. I feel it. Over lattes and scones, Margaret shared the saga. Samuel listened intently. Manipulators thrive on silence, he said. Set boundaries and their control evaporates. But she's my daughter. Love her, but from strength. I told my kids the same after my divorce. No more endless handouts. Mutual respect or nothing. Did it work? Mostly. My youngest still struggles, but I release the guilt. They walked the trails afterward, talking dreams, travel to Italy, writing memoirs. At Lydia's door, Samuel squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you know. The race starts with the first step. That night, Margaret packed. Tomorrow, Denver, the battle. Better alone with pride than trapped in disrespect, she whispered. Part 5, The Confrontation. December 28th, 4:30 p.m. The flight landed amid flurries. Lydia's farewell hug. Call me after. Home at 6 p.m. Sophia opened the door, eyes swollen. Victor lurked behind, arms crossed. The house gleamed, had they cleaned. Margaret changed into slacks and her new coat, descending at 7 sharp. They sat in the living room, her in the armchair, them on the sofa. Silence stretched. Victor broke it. We owe you an apology, the photo, we overreacted. Generous, Margaret said dryly, but this isn't about the photo. Sophia fidgeted. About the lawyer, I went because Victor suggested it. I'm sorry. Why? Margaret pressed. Victor, to plan. Families discuss inheritance. By sneaking, you have no right to my assets. We've lived here years, contributed, Victor snapped. Margaret pulled out printed statements. $92,300. That's what I've spent on you. Bills, loans, luxuries. Sophia gasped. Mom, I didn't realize. Because you didn't care. Victor stood. This is Lydia's influence, poisoning you against us. No one poisoned me. I woke up. Sophia tugged Victor's sleeve. She's right. We've been awful. Victor whirled. Quiet. She's the victim, always silent until now. Because respect should be given, not begged for. Victor stormed out, slamming the door. If you evict us, you're alone forever. His words pierced, but Margaret stood firm. If family means erasure, I'll choose solitude. Sophia remained, tears flowing. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. Dad's death broke me, but I used you. Victor. He convinces me of things. Margaret hugged her. I love you, but changes come. Lawyer tomorrow, conditions on the will. Rent, $1,200 month. Respect my space. Sophia nodded. If Victor won't, I'll choose you. That night, Margaret slept deeply in her bed, the weight lifting. The war ended not with victory, but truth. Sophia chose family, real family. Victor left weeks later, but bonds mended. Margaret traveled, dated Samuel, lived fully. In the end, secrets revealed brought justice, and Margaret discovered. True strength blooms in self-love. In the quiet suburbs of San Diego, California, where the ocean breeze carried the faint scent of salt and eucalyptus, lived Margaret Thompson, a 67-year-old widow who had spent her life building a comfortable existence from nothing. She had worked as a school teacher for over 4 decades, saving every penny to buy her modest 2-story home with its sunny backyard garden. Her husband, Edward, had passed away 7 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving her with their only child, Alex, and a void that time had only partially healed. Margaret had always been the pillar of strength, practical, kind-hearted, and fiercely independent. But in the years following Edward's death, that strength had been eroded, bit by bit, by the people she loved most. It started innocently enough. Alex, her 35-year-old son, had hit a rough patch 3 years ago. His graphic design business tanked during the economic downturn, and his wife, Sophia, a glamorous former event planner with expensive tastes, had been laid off from her job. They were drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, car payments overdue, and their apartment lease about to expire. "Mom," Alex had pleaded over the phone one rainy evening, "we just need a place to crash for a few months until we get back on our feet. Please." Margaret hadn't hesitated. "Of course, come home," she'd said. Home was her sanctuary, a place filled with memories of family dinners, Edward's laughter, and the rose bushes they'd planted together. But from the moment Alex and Sophia moved in, things changed. Sophia, with her sharp features, impeccable manicures, and designer handbags, even when unemployed, took charge. "This place needs a refresh," she declared on day one, eyeing Margaret's cherished antique furniture with disdain. "It's so dated." At first, Margaret brushed it off. She was happy to have her son close. But soon, Sophia's refreshes turned invasive. She sold Margaret's vintage dining table on an online marketplace. "We needed the cash for Alex's new computer," she explained casually. The floral curtains Edward had hung were replaced with sleek blinds. Family photos were boxed up and shoved into the attic. "Clutter is bad for the vibe," Sophia said with a wink. Margaret protested weakly, but Alex always sided with his wife. "Mom, she's just trying to make it feel like our home, too." The financial burden crept in slowly. Margaret paid the utilities, groceries, and even Sophia's gym membership. For her mental health, Alex insisted. Sophia didn't work. Instead, she spent her days shopping online or lunching with friends, charging it all to Margaret's credit card. "We'll pay you back soon," she promised, but the reimbursements never came. Margaret's savings dwindled from $120,000 to under $40,000 in 3 years. She dipped into her retirement fund to cover the mortgage, all while Alex's business recovered at a snail's pace. Margaret felt invisible in her own home. Dinners were tense. Sophia dominated conversations, criticizing Margaret's cooking or suggesting healthier options that required expensive organic ingredients. Alex, once her confident boy, had become passive, echoing Sophia's opinions like a shadow. Margaret confided in her best friend, Linda, a retired nurse living in Phoenix. "They're treating me like a bank," Margaret whispered during their weekly calls. Linda urged her to set boundaries. "Maggie, you're enabling them. You need to speak up." But Margaret hated confrontation. She feared losing Alex, her only family. Loneliness loomed like a specter, holidays alone, birthdays forgotten. So she stayed silent, her resentment festering like a hidden wound. The breaking point came on December 23, 2024. Margaret had planned a quiet Christmas, her first without Edward's traditions feeling forced. But Sophia announced a girls' trip to Las Vegas with friends, booking flights on Margaret's card without asking. "It's just $800, Alina, Margaret. We'll celebrate when I get back." Alex shrugged. "She needs a break, Mom." That night, Margaret sat alone in her darkened living room, staring at the twinkling lights of the Christmas tree she'd decorated by herself. Tears streamed down her face. "Enough," she muttered. On impulse, she booked a flight to Phoenix to visit Linda. It was her first solo trip in years. As the plane lifted off, a strange calm washed over her. For once, she wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations. In Phoenix, Linda's cozy adobe home was a haven. They baked cookies, walked in the desert, and talked late into the night. Linda introduced Margaret to her brother, George, a widowed mechanic in his early 70s with a gentle smile and a love for classic cars. He joined them for Christmas dinner, sharing stories that made Margaret laugh, a sound she hadn't heard from herself in months. A photo from that evening, Margaret and George smiling under string lights, captured a spark of joy she thought lost forever. Back home on December 28th, the house felt colder. Alex and Sophia were lounging in the living room, takeout containers scattered. "Where were you?" Sophia demanded, not bothering to hide her annoyance. "We had to fend for ourselves." Margaret took a deep breath. "I was in Phoenix with Linda, and we need to talk." She laid it all out. The sold furniture, the drained savings, the disrespect. "You need to start paying rent $200 a month or find your own place." Sophia exploded. "Rent, from you, we're family." Alex looked torn but defended his wife. "Mom, we're trying, don't be dramatic." The argument escalated. Sophia hurled insults. "You're just a lonely old woman clinging to this house like it's your life. Alex deserves it more than you do." Margaret retreated to her room, heart pounding, but something had shifted. The silence was broken. That night, she emailed Linda. "I need a lawyer." Linda recommended Mr. Ramirez, a sharp estate attorney in San Diego. Margaret scheduled an appointment for January 2nd. December 29th dawned crisp. Margaret made coffee, her hands steady. Sophia sauntered in, makeup flawless. "Morning, Margaret. About last night, things got heated. We didn't mean it." Margaret stirred her coffee, unmoved. "Did you?" Sophia laughed fakely. "Of course not. We're family. Look, Alex and I talked. We can chip in $200 a month, a gesture." $200, when you cost me over $2,000 monthly. "It's what we can afford. And in return, we should have a say in house decisions, like remodeling." Margaret's blood boiled. Sophia was baiting her, hiding the hook. "Let me think about it." "Oh, and about your will," Sophia added casually. "I hope you remember Alex is your only son. This house should be his. You're not eternal, Margaret." The words hung like a threat. Margaret feigned weakness. "I'm so confused at my age." Sophia's eyes gleamed. "Trust us. Cancel that lawyer appointment. We can handle it as a family, no fees." Margaret agreed vaguely, but as Sophia left humming, she pulled out her phone. She'd recorded everything. Hands trembling, she saved the file securely. She called Mr. Ramirez to confirm. "Bring the recording," he said gravely. "We may need protections, an irrevocable trust, life estate, maybe even a restraining order if there's risk." Risk, the word chilled her. Was Sophia capable of more? That afternoon, Margaret feigned fatigue. Downstairs, she overheard Alex and Sophia arguing, Sophia's insistence, Alex's hesitation. Evening brought Alex to her door. "Mom, Sophia said you made things difficult." "Difficult," she offered pennies. Alex sighed, defeated. "She's acting, Mom, afraid you'll kick us out, but once it's over, it'll revert." "And what do you want?" "To be a family, but I don't know if it's possible with her like this." "Then decide, son, dignity or loneliness." He paused. "I'd choose dignity. Loneliness is temporary, losing yourself is forever." Margaret's heart swelled. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll respect your choice." He hugged her. "I've lost you, Mom, I want you back." Tears came, not sorrow but hope. January 2nd, Margaret dressed sharply, navy slacks, crisp blouse, sensible flats. Alex drove. Sophia sat back, smug in a chic dress. Mr. Ramirez's office was modern with ocean views. He greeted them coolly, eyeing Sophia. He explained the old will, everything to Alex, no protections. Sophia smirked, normal for married couples. Margaret played the recording. Sophia's voice echoed. "You're not eternal. Cancel the lawyer. Trust us." Alex paled. "Sophia, you said that." "You recorded me. Illegal." "One-party consent in California," Mr. Ramirez countered. The new plan, irrevocable trust for the house. Margaret's life estate. Upon death, to Alex with conditions, No sale for 15 years, no mortgage, 50% rental profits to a charity for abused elders. Violation, house to charity. Rent, $1,200 monthly or vacate in 30 days. Sophia raged. Abuse, charging your son. Alex stared then. Mom's right, we've exploited her, I accept. Sophia stormed out. You'll regret this. Alex wept. Margaret held him. It's over, son. They signed. Home felt lighter. Sophia left that day, note venomous. Realize your mistake too late. Weeks passed. Alex paid rent, cooked, sought therapy. Sophia called once back. I said no, I need to heal. Margaret beamed. Proud of you. George visited from Phoenix, bearing daisies. Coffee? Their talks deepened into dates, walks on the beach, quiet dinners. No rush, just companionship. In March, Alex moved out. Need to stand alone, Margaret cried proudly. April brought a call. Hospital. Sophia in a minor accident, Margaret her emergency contact. She went, found Sophia bruised, alone. Why come? Compassion. Sophia apologized tearfully. I became horrible chasing security. We learn from mistakes. Forgive yourself first. By December 2025, the house brimmed with joy. Alex and his new partner, Mia, a teacher like Margaret. Linda visiting, George, neighbors. Turkey, pies, laughter. Toast. To second chances, boundaries, growth. To choosing yourself, never too late. Margaret smiled at her reclaimed life. The treasure wasn't the house. It was her soul, unbroken. If this resonates, remember, your voice matters. Today could be your day.